Insert disc 2.
We're rolling.
Where's the robot? Insert disc 2.
There's no robot that says that.
What are we talking about this week, Boatster?
So what I was wondering,
Yeah.
you know, I know
This is where we just lay back. We got our cold ones here, got the booze, and we just what's tonight's topic?
I know that you hate Macintosh. You hate Apple. You dislike
Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
Now, and you are currently what most of us would call a Windows user. You are a user of the Windows operating system.
I wouldn't agree with that statement, actually.
Okay, what operating system do you use for 99% of all workday?
No, well, hold on a second there. Don't try to. Nobody puts Aaron in the corner here, Boat. You're saying that I don't like Mac, but I'm a Windows user. Like you're making it like that. I like Windows
I'm not setting it up that way. You gotta let me finish.
You're angling. Go ahead.
Okay. So
I do use Windows for 99% of my days.
You have very justifiable reasons, I think, for not using a Mac. Okay. Is there anything that Microsoft could do to make you give up Windows and go to something else?
Oh, they've already done it. They've already done it. This is the end of the line for Windows. I gotta have to learn Linux like all the other smart people. You know, like the dumb guy, here I come. Oh, help me. They've done it. I don't like Windows 10. I hate it. I've hated everything past Windows 7. I'm not a Windows guy. Listen, this is like politics. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I'm an Aaron. Do it my way. It's the same thing. Do I like Mac? No. Do I like the Mac legacy? No, I don't. But the Windows legacy is just as bad. I have no favorites in this race. I've used Windows because that's what I had. That's what I was given or had access to and what I could afford. All right. But I have no love for it. It's not like I was talking to my buddy at work about this. It's funny you should bring it up. We love the Amiga. Okay. And we both love the Atari. Okay. There was a time back in the day, if I may use a term that no one's ever used.
Dizzy is the correct word.
That you had people that used the Amiga, you had people that used the C64, you had people that used the Commodore VIC-20, you had TI-99 people, you had Coco people, right? You had a whole slew of people. They all used their computers. It was a happy time because we all had our own thing. And there may be a little fighting amongst each other, but it was friendly fighting because we all had our own passions. We had what we liked or what we were given. Really, now, if you fighting over a PC now is like fighting over a toaster. People that get attached to their computers now in 2018 are fools. These are not something to get passionate over. It's a beige box with some stuff in it and the second it's obsolete, you throw it in the garbage. You know, there's no reason to. It's not like you would keep the stuff. Why would I care? Why do I care what's on my hard drive that makes the operating system go? You know, I want the thing that lets me watch Netflix.
Okay. You still haven't answered my question.
Okay. What's the question?
Okay. What would it take for you to not use Windows anymore?
I'd have to have a new job.
No. Okay. You're still not understanding the question. So say Microsoft comes on the scene. I'm going to give you one example and says, okay, going forward, every registered user of Windows has to pay us $5 a month to keep getting service packs.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be something that would cause you to stop using Windows?
I'm trying to decide how blunt I should be. Let's be real blunt. Let's be honest.
Well, that's what I want.
I'm going to talk because this is the show for the common man.
Okay.
And I'm as common as you get. I can use Windows for as long as I want, for as free as I want, from now until doomsday. Okay? Unless they radically change Windows.
Okay. But that's the thing.
So let's say they came out with, you're proposing that there was a new Windows that I could not find an angle to get for free,
right,
that I had to pay.
Right.
I don't even need that. Because like I said, this is the end of the line. Why does anyone use any operating system? Okay? Because when you get on your computer, when we're done with this show, and you go up to your room or you sit here and you're like, okay, I want to do X. Okay? Do you think to yourself, okay, here's my operating system. This is cool. Or do you think to yourself, I want to surf the web. I want to play game number 4. I want to listen to a song. I want to like look at Netflix or it's the functionality. When something is functional enough to let me do the things I want to do without me having to worry about Windows, I'm in. It's as simple as that. Now, we both know, now I've never had a Mac. So the functionality of a Macintosh or an Apple, all right, is foreign to me because I've never owned one. So I don't, in essence, I don't know what I'm missing, right? Fair? So it's easy for me to throw all that aside. I don't know what I'm missing. Okay, so I'm just looking in the sphere of Windows and Linux. I need everything I need to do. I need a computer that'll do it. Right now, for me, that computer is a Windows computer. It's not because I have any affiliation with Windows. It's because I have to have Windows to run stuff like my news group reader, just oddball stuff, my FTP client, will it let me watch the WWF network, stuff like that, which Linux not necessarily will not let you do all of that stuff. Okay, you have to be really clever, or it go through a lot of work, or it just simply won't do it. Can I play Fire Pro in Linux? Probably not. So you see my point. So when you say I'm a Windows user, it's almost a slap because I have no choice.
Sure, and I think that most people would agree with you. My question was, could Microsoft ever do anything so egregious to make you leave the platform?
Well, luckily you can use older versions of Windows and still keep those going. So it would have to. Let's say if it took 10 years from now, where you can't use Windows 10, you've got to be on Windows 20 or Windows 15. And everything you ran before is now so old it won't work. This first chance I get, I'm going to Linux. Do I have any affinity to Linux? Absolutely not. Because in some ways it's a step backwards. Because I've got to learn a bunch of weird DOS commands, and it's foreign to me. I mean, I've dabbled in it with the Raspberry Pi, but it's not something I feel comfortable in like I do
Have you ever
DOS.
used any of the Linux GUIs?
Yes, absolutely. I've used Mint a bunch of times, and there's another one I've used, and they're okay, but they're not as simple. I mean, it's you're out of your comfort zone.
Right, it's something different.
Right, but my not liking Mac or Apple, it's not necessarily the functionality of the OS. I mean, I'm sure iOS is okay. I'm sure Mac OS whatever is perfectly fine. Because otherwise, I don't suspect Apple's going to put. I mean, say what you will about Apple, but they're going to put out a decent product. I'm not saying they'll put out crap. They're not going to give you. I mean, it's mostly not garbage. They're going to give you something decent. So I'm sure it's fine. It's just that I don't like them. I've never liked them
Sure.
for a multitude of reasons. But then again, Microsoft has done just as many crummy things. So I guess I don't like anybody.
Okay, follow-up question.
All right.
Have you ever been excited for the impending release of an operating system?
Yes, absolutely. The one that comes to mind is XP. I thought was, have you ever used Windows 3, 3.1?
Yeah, that was the very first Windows I ever used in my life.
Windows 3, 3.1 were crap. And I can only speak for my circles, but we avoided Windows when it came out like the plague. We couldn't see the point of it. We didn't know what it was. GUI was new to most PC owners. Now, at the time, I had not had an Amiga, but I did have the Tandy that had the front end, but the front end, we just skipped right past it. We never used it. So you didn't understand what you were getting. So I'll look back, and it's 3.1 crap. It's not great, but it was a step forward. Then you've got 95, which was the leap between those two. I can't stress how large it was. It was a massive leap, and Windows 95 lingered for quite a while.
So what was it when you were? So the answer to your question is Windows 95.
Windows
right?
95 and Windows XP were the two great leaps. Yeah.
What excited you about the prospect of them?
Well, for XP, it was better plug-and-play support. That was a big deal. If you're not an old guy, you don't remember what it's like to manually set IRQs on sound cards or serial ports. It was a real pain. It was a hassle. And DOS and Windows weren't necessarily the best at that early on. So plug-and-play support was a big deal. Networking became something that was a much bigger deal. If you've ever networked with 98, Windows XP was a much easier, way to go. I'm looking back, I'm trying to think of the difference between 3.1 and 95, aside from the graphical issues. But they were great, but it's been so long since I used 3.1, and I used it so sparingly that I just remember Windows 95 was the first Windows where I could look at it and be like, that's something, as opposed to this is nothing. I'm not going to even bother, because and most games wouldn't run in 3.1.
Right. I think so, that was for me. Yeah. My parents, the first modern PC, we went right from the IBM XT clone to this Windows 3.1 computer, and I remember there were a lot of Windows 95 was the first OS where there would be games that would come out for Windows 95 that you would not run on Windows 3.1. And I remember that being, I remember Mech Warrior. This was when I started hanging out with your brother. And he was like, I've got this and this and this, but you'll need Windows 95. And I was like, oh. So,
I think Windows 9, I would get myself in trouble. But I believe Windows 95 is the only copy of Windows I ever actually physically bought.
Really?
I did buy 95. Now, I've had legit copies of pretty much all the Windows, but I didn't necessarily buy them. I was given them. Found them, I came across them, but I bought that one, and it was worth it. And Windows 98, don't get me wrong, I don't want to undersell. In terms of the evolution of Windows, the big leaps were from XP from Windows 95 to XP to Windows 7. Okay, and that's it. Okay, that's it. The crap, and then you've got small leaps that were important. Windows 95 to Windows 98. Windows 98 provided USB support and plug-and-play support that was better, and some Ethernet support that was better, and a few other things. The jump from XP to Vista was absolutely god-awful. And so that was the worst. And the jump from Windows XP or Windows 98 to Windows ME was horrible, with a few exceptions. A lot of people hate ME more than me because I've used it more than most people. But there were a few things I liked about it. But for the most part, it was not good. I think that was the first time that they got rid of true DOS in Windows, because that's when, after that, there was no real DOS anymore. You were just booting to Windows. Windows 2000 as an operating system, I didn't use that much. It was more corporate. I never had it at home. But I used it at work, but never at home. I know the networking and security issues were solved in Windows 2000, but for me, it wasn't this big a quantum leap. I believe Windows XP is built on the same kernel as 2000, so a lot of people are probably yelling at me. So I'll nod my head there. But Windows 7 was a sound operating system, but everything after that I've not liked, because as sad as this is, Windows and Microsoft have wanted to be Mac. They desperately want to be Mac, or they want to be iOS. They want a walled garden. They want to own. They want to control what you put on your computer. They want to sell you everything you put on the computer.
What they really want is huge wads of cash.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. Who's number one? It's Apple, right?
Right.
Why?
Yeah.
They've got a walled garden, and they're making all the money, and so that's it. And Microsoft wants all the money.
Right. I
don't want to pay the money.
Yeah. Well.
So does that answer your question?
That's good. That was a good insert disc too.
That's it. So the whole insert disc too is me bitching about various operating systems. That's it. What do you think? Don't just interview me. Chime in. What do you think? Because I know you're a Mac guy. So did you come up with the various Mac OSs?
Well, I entered the Mac scene with OS 10 basically. I never really used for real any of the classic Macs other than just messing around to play games with.
The black and white one you've got is a what Mac is that?
That's a Mac Plus.
And that was what, circa 88?
Yeah, well, it was actually the before this recent Mac Mini, it was the longest Mac that was ever in production.
Right, but it was somewhere, but it debuted in 86, right?
I think it was 87.
Okay, yeah. I should know this. I just did some research on it, yeah.
And, I had one of those, or I wanted to buy one of those because the Lilies had one, and I thought it was really cool because it was like this little cute thing,
Now, this is the monochrome one.
This is the monochrome one, yeah. And
but they had a color version that you don't have. That's
no, the Color Classic was...
As 88.
No, that came out much later. It was in the 90s.
Okay. Yeah. I know they had a color version in the 80s, according to my research.
I don't believe that's true. I don't think that the color Mac appeared until the 90s.
Okay.
There were black and white Macs were the norm.
Well, we'll see about that.
Forever.
Well,
Maybe the chat can. I
believe they had one in like 88 was the year I'm thinking of. Go ahead.
But anyway, when I first started using the Mac, it was when OS 10 first came out, and that was a sea change among the Mac community, and it divided the Mac community like you wouldn't believe, because it was an entirely different system. Everything about it was different. You know, when Steve Jobs was at Next, and this was Next OS ported to the Mac. So file management was different. The way that programs opened was different. But the thing that I thought was cool was that when I was working at Apple, people would come in and they would see stuff, and I look on this in retrospective and think it's funny, because a lot of this sort of, I'm playing into your hand here, because I'm going to say things that aren't necessarily flattering about the Mac, but I would show people how to do all this stuff, and in my mind it was like only Macs could do this, and they would be wowed by it, and I would be like, watch this, and I'd minimize a bunch of windows, and then I'd alt tab. And they'd be like, I've never seen anything like that before. And I was like, that's right. Only the Mac can bring this to you. Meanwhile, years later, when I started to use Windows computers, I realized even in XP, you could alt-tab between applications. So what the Mac is always been good at is identifying things that make people go, wow, this is really cool, and putting that out up front and saying, we can do this and this and this. In the Windows world, you can do a lot of the same stuff, but you don't have the marketing team that knows this is what people really value. You know, you can see that in a program like Microsoft Office. You know, think about all of the different iterations and trying to find things. You've got the ribbon, you've got the endless menus,
the new ones, the
like
ribbon
that.
system, it's all horrible. It's
yeah.
horrible. And whoever thought that was a good idea, I don't know, what were they thinking?
Right.
And it's god awful.
You know, I think that the real secret to Apple's success, at least, you know, with its computers, is that they have really good designers that know what people want to make them the most productive they can be. I don't think that there's anything inherently better about macOS. Now, people will go on and on about the way that like window management works and the way that you remember Windows size and position is better on the Mac than on Windows. But for me, when I open up an app, I full screen it and I go. You know, I'm not one of those people. But I did, you know, when every new macOS came out, it used to be, and another thing that was cool about macOS is that it was super cheap. You know, macOS releases were only $50. You know, Windows, you pay $100 minimum, and now macOS releases are free. And so, you know, because Apple's making its money, of course, on the hardware.
Yeah, big time.
But when I left, one of the main reasons why I left macOS was with the 10.7, which was Lion. They completely scrapped, or they made it difficult to find a file-based like hierarchy. You know, like you normally have in Windows Explorer, where you click in a folder and there's another folder and there's another folder. Now there's just one thing that says all my stuff. And you can either scan through this huge list or you have to search for stuff. And I was just like, you had the system that worked. You know, you have the system of files that lead to other files. And I guess you can still get to it, but they took it out of the system and you had to put it back in, and I hated it. And at that time, my Mac was getting old and I was like, you know what? It's time to just switch over to Windows. Because to be honest with you, you know, Windows 7, pretty darn good. Pretty darn good. You know, a lot of the security things had been fixed. You know, Apple sold so many computers just on the backs of people that were just so sick of their computer bogging down with viruses and stuff because they were still running XP Service Pack 1.
Yeah. You know, I think we could both agree on one thing. Both companies have lost their way in the PC world, in my opinion. From a user's perspective, they may have found their way into making a crap load of dough perspective. Mm-hmm. I saw your conversation on Discord about the guy you guys talk about how you can't even get a Mac for under $1,000 anymore. Mm-hmm. Mac has priced themselves, and listen, I don't blame Apple because they're such a their clientele are such. How can I put this nicely?
Well,
the Apple clientele do what Apple say. And so if Apple say, or to look cool, or whoever it is, because don't tell me it's not a niche market that shoots for the high end.
Well, I'll tell you what it is. Apple is an aspirational brand. You get kids, and they see Matthew Broderick, probably not Matthew Broderick. Insert your movie star or
Matthew Broderick.
You know, he's hot these days, right? Anyway, they see all these movie stars, and they're always, whenever they're using a laptop, it's always a Mac. and they're like, boy, I want to own a Mac. And so they'll do whatever it takes. They'll beg mom night and day to get that computer that has the Apple on the back. And Apple knows that, and that's why they're experimenting with the computer components they're as cheap as they've ever been, but Apple is charging more than they ever have.
Sure. And what do you get? And I'm not done. The PC is going the exact same way. Windows 10 is a continual intrusive annoyance. You can't control anything. It runs your computer, rules you like a king. You know, the only difference is you can put it on different computers. But I mean, once you get the OS on there, I can't tell you the amount of stuff you have to go turn off. And I'm sure a lot of you people are listening to this and understand, just to make it usable. Right. Okay. It's not a good way to go. And so here's Linux out there, and it's always been there. And in the old days, it was clunky. It gets a little bit better every year. But I mean, I know the time is drawing near where I'm just going to have to, you know, it's a lot like people that have iOS. No matter what you think of Mac or Apple, you're invested in that environment. You can't just hop out. You've spent all your time here, all your stuff's here. You know, it's like Google tries the same thing, right? I've got Google Mail, and I've got my Google Docs. All that crap's lining. They want you to be in their environment. But the day's coming. I think I'm not going to be the only person. We're just finally just say, screw you, and screw you, I'm out. And you have to move on to the thing that you can live with, you know? So, but I mean, listen, I'm going to give us a compliment. We're not idiots, generally. Your average person, they're going to link, and Microsoft and Apple don't give a crap about people like us. They're looking for Joe Blow. They want those guys in there. Like, my kid doesn't know anything about nothing. He wants to play game A, you know? I saw a report that said 60% of kids can't identify any computer components.
Oh, you wouldn't believe it.
It's the same thing.
You wouldn't believe it. Listen to this. So I had a document up on the screen.
Yeah.
And I went and they're like, oh, you misspelled that. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'll change it. And so I used the cursor keys to move the cursor to where they're like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm using the arrow. You can use the arrow keys to move the cursor? I was like, yeah. They're like, I'm always trying to fish around with the mouse. I was like, the kids did not know you could use the arrow keys to move the cursor on a Word doc.
Listen, when you're my age, and to a certain extent your age as well, but when I came up, there was no computer.
Right.
Then there was the most basic freaking computer. And so we learned to use computers. We had to. Your age, when you got there were remedial computers. Then they were better. But the whole time you're like, okay, I'm adjusting, I'm working, I'm learning. Kids now, they come out and it's the perfect, ultimate computer. They don't got to do jack squat. They don't have to edit the auto exec. They don't have to free up a bunch of memory. You know?
And on top of that, the computer that they're using at school is completely different to the way that they interface with technology at home. Because at home, they've got their tablet and their phone. And so, I understand why that was such a mind-blowing thing, but it tickled me that something that I take for granted. There was like...
Well, it's funny. The article I read said most kids could identify some things in a computer. They could say, like, there's chips in there or there's memory. So I asked the kid, I said, Luke, do you know what's in a computer? And he goes, chips? I was like, that's right.
Yeah.
That's all he knew. And so I thought to myself, well, before the year's out, I'm going to teach this kid every part of a computer. Just so he'll know.
Yeah.
Because I'm worried about stuff like this because a lot of this stuff's so automated, it's so easy.
It's funny because this is the exact same conversation that people a generation older than us had about cars.
And they're right.
Yeah.
They're right. I did not, my dad's a mechanic type. I did not, he wanted me to help him. And I tried. I didn't care. I didn't get it. I didn't care. And so guess what? I can, and the thing is now my basic knowledge about how to change a tire, blow up tires, change and put new oil in or fill out the fluids. Now my knowledge is more advanced than almost everyone who even knows less than me. The car won't start if it's in drive. Stuff, simple stuff. We're screwed on that. This is going to be a crisis, I think, where things have become so simplified that the mechanical aspects of stuff people aren't understanding.
I agree with you.
My God.